Hi, hello, good day everyone. I'm Jasper and Victoria, and I'll be continuing off our discussion for Chapter 13, Cognitive. Before we formally begin, game of Guess the Movie. The mechanics are simple. All you need to do is simply guess the title of the movie after reading a little bit of title. So, are you ready? In three, two, one. You read this, please, Mr. X. How can I? It's in Chinese. Give it a try. Concentrate. How can I read this? You're misbehaving, your attitude is all wrong, you're being naughty. So I believe you already have an answer in mind. If you do, please submit your entries to this email address where if you get the exact name of the movie as well as the director, you can get up to 200 pesos for your money's worth. Alright? So are we ready? In 3, 2, 1. That is, Par, or like Stars on Earth, directed by Amir Khan. So congratulations to whoever was the lucky winner of 200 pesos. Thank you so much for dedicating your time in participating and in watching our video report. So why did I include this? Well, aside from it being a reference to an old favorite movie of mine, this dialogue is a reminder that most of us cannot read symbols that we do not recognize, of course, and we can't even connect them to sounds and meaning if we don't really know them. But that's even more difficult for the individuals with dyslexia, which is going to be the main topic of this report. So with this, we're going to hopefully accomplish learning objective number 9, where after studying this module, you should be able to describe the research on dyslexia. Let's first define dyslexia. Dyslexia is an impairment of reading by someone with adequate vision, motivation, cognitive skills, and educational opportunity. Keywords here are impairment and adequate. This means that dyslexia is not caused by laziness, low intelligence, or even poor teaching alone. It's not your teacher's fault. If everything is going right, it means that there's something underlying it, where there's difficulty relating to the processing of the language itself. So what are its characteristics? One is that it's hereditary, meaning it runs in families. And of course, it's more common in boys than girls. But even if you have a genetic defect or genetic variant, there's really nothing that points toward, okay, if you have this, you're most likely to get dyslexia. It's something that just happens. One important thing to note is that it occurs in many languages. Actually, it occurs in all, just more on English, because of the many irregular spellings that they have. Consider these two words. Choir. In pronouncing it, you substitute C and H into Q, which is weird because when you look at it originally, it should sound like choir, but no, it's choir. Or even the word phlegm. Noticing the first two words P and H, you think it'd go like phlegm. But no, it's phlegm because the P and H is now turned to F. Or even the other words there, where there are certain rules for turning other words silent or blending them. There's a lot of different rules. But Kalat did say that even if it wasn't English, dyslexia always pertains to difficulty in converting those symbols into sounds. That's the killer there. So let's look at the research. First one points us to perhaps a biological link. Studies found abnormalities in the left hemisphere of the brain even before children were taught to read. How did they observe that? Well, they first identified children from families with histories of dyslexia, then tested them before when they were young, and after, probably a couple of years later, they did verify that, okay, they did develop it in the end. So the main point of this finding here is it's not something that's caused by poor education once again, but rather is something that you can inherit, of course. The second finding relates more on to one important brain area that they found is actually involved in reading itself. That is the visual word form area, where this specific area of the brain for children with dyslexia is actually less selective, meaning it responds less strongly than average to words and more strongly to other objects. But let's get back to that later. First, what is the visual word form area? Again, it's a special area that's located within the temporal cortex. It's specialized in recognizing words and is more active in the left hemisphere. Interestingly enough, it's adjacent to the area that's most responsible for facial recognition, which is also more active in the right hemisphere. Now, they did find that If there's damage to the visual word form area, then your ability to read is actually going to be in a very precarious situation because that's the part that's getting affected. But nothing else is actually getting affected there. So we can so from that alone we can verify that the visual word form area has a lot to do with language and reading. Let's get back to what we said earlier, to the finding. So what does this mean when the visual word form area is less selective? It means it's kind of generalized in the sense that they have lesser focus on the word as they aren't filtering out other stimuli that aren't really necessary to understanding or analyzing it, such as sounds, or sensations, or even just other visual stimulus. With this, they have lesser focus on understanding or appreciating what the actual shape is, what the actual meaning is of the sound that's correlating to that letter, and in the end, their analysis is lacking and they cannot fully capture the meaning. Now, interestingly, there's another sub-research on this where they pondered, is the VWFA, or the visual word form area, unresponsive for blind people? Fascinatingly, the finding here that it becomes active as well for them, where normally it is highly responsive to written words, for blind people, is actually highly responsive to words in Braille. The implication here is they're substituting the visual information with another sensation, which is touch. That is how they're able to respond to the words now. And in that sense, the visual word form area is not totally unresponsive at all. Now I will be showing you two specific pictures that is related to this topic. This picture just simply captures all the other areas that work together in capturing how they differentiate, how they are being selective with what they see and then understanding the words. Where we have the Exner's area for handwriting, your muscle memory in writing a word. The Broca's area or how you articulate or how you vocalize a certain word. The plantar temporal that digests the phonemes. And also, of course, the visual word form area, which focuses on the visual representation of the letters. It is with all of these working together that we're able to understand that B is not equals to D, and actually, Bravo is different from Adigo or delicious. Supplementing this information, let's take a look at what is the difference between a typical and a dyslexic brain. For a typical, all three areas, the Broca's area, parieto-temporal, and the occipital-temporal, they all have activity. However, in a dyslexic reader, the Broca's area has much more activity, but there's little to no activity for the parietal temporal and the occipital temporal. This means that they're focused more on articulating a word or simply analyzing, but then the other areas that are also important for analyzing and for digesting the form of the word, they're no longer active or there's little to no activity. In this instance, we can see that, okay, there is also a certain difference in brain activity that makes it hard for dyslexic readers to really comprehend language. So before we continue with the third finding, let us understand that all of this research so far has been done with a caveat that most studies have been small scale. So they've been comparing typical readers and dyslexic readers in really small sample, such as 10 for each. And the implication is, of course, there's going to be a serious risk of accidental or misleading findings. So they've been careful with this. And of course, there's still more research that be needed. It didn't stop them from reaching other findings, which is finding number three, a consistency in the inconsistency. The meaning here, while I personally dubbed it that, is that different people have different kind of reading problems. So just because two people have dyslexia doesn't mean that they're all going to the same thing. One person may be having auditory problems, while the second one might be having attention problems, or another person might be having impaired control of their eye movement. So it might be twitching, or it might be not really responding too well, or not focusing too well on one specific word, or sometimes even both. Or thirdly, they have a difficulty in sounding out words. For the third case, they compensate by just simply memorizing the whole word in its entirety. So that's just an interesting fact there. Speaking of hearing, let's move forward to the another part, which is dyslexia and hearing. If hearing problems are common among people with dyslexia, is the problem in the auditory information? The answer? No. Researchers have also observed that, in actuality, the main cause, or the main focal point here, is the impaired auditory memory, where they have trouble detecting the order of sounds or even identifying the difference between two sequences of tones. What does this mean in actuality or in practical? It looks like not noticing the difference between beep, buzz, and beep, buzz, click. In the same way where I got it mixed up by having two things at the same time. it might seem like, okay, those two things, they're kind of the same. There's nothing different there. And in addition, if in the classroom, if you can recall if you're a teacher, please refer to page 8, paragraph 6, numbers and sentence number 1. There's a lot of string of commands. They can mix it up by thinking, okay, what page was it? Page 6, paragraph 1, page 8. And they won't even know the difference. That may not be for everyone, but that is one thing that you can expect from people with dyslexia, and they also have hearing problems. Now, another important finding is it also has a certain dynamic with attention, where people with dyslexia have alterations of attention. Some find it difficult to focus when letters are even too close together, and reading for them will be overwhelming in that way. To help illustrate this, let us look at this certain photo. So the main point of this photograph is we focus our attention on these dotted lines in the middle, and then we try to perceive the letters to the left and to the right. For typical readers, they're able to see that NOE and TWC in their totality, but typical readers will have difficulty in even grasping what is on the bottom letters, such as IEY or WCI. That's where the difference is, because in a way, dyslexic readers have a superpower because they are able to see or perceive letters 5 or 10 letters to the left or to the right. So if typical readers can see letters close to each other, dyslexic readers can or have the ability to perceive the letters that are far apart from each other. But in the same way, it's compensated by the fact that they can also have difficulty when they're crowded together. That's a lot of information, but that's pretty much all of the research on dyslexia. So let us summarize all that we know about dyslexia. Firstly, it is genetic and heritable. Secondly, it's affected by abnormality in the left hemisphere or damage to the visual waveform area. Thirdly, it's a unique experience for each and every person. And lastly, it is a rewarding subject if you took the time to watch the video report. Okay, so that wraps it up for our discussion on dyslexia and lateralization and language. Next up will be our discussion on consciousness. That's for the next part of this video series. See you soon!